I had spent years building a quiet life on my mountain ranch. Nobody in the nearby HOA knew much about me, and I preferred it that way. But one morning, everything changed when a sheriff's vehicle stopped outside my gate. I had no idea the woman who sent him was the HOA president. I was repairing a fence when I heard an engine approaching. A sheriff's SUV rolled toward my private gate and stopped without warning. I wiped the dust from my hands and walked over to see what was happening. Then I noticed there was someone else sitting inside the vehicle. The deputy introduced himself and said he needed to speak with me. I asked what the problem was, but his answer immediately concerned me. He said the HOA had reported a dispute over my ranch property. I told him there was no HOA authority over my private land. Daniel claimed the HOA had paperwork giving them authority over part of my property. I asked him to show me the document. He opened the folder and started explaining their version of events. But the paperwork he carried didn't prove what he thought it did. I pulled out my own property records and showed him the actual boundary. The deed clearly placed a disputed section inside my ranch. Daniel studied the documents but didn't seem convinced. Then he told me his sister wanted the gate opened immediately. A few minutes later, Victoria Whitmore arrived in a luxury SUV. She was the HOA president and Daniel's sister. She walked toward my gate as if she already owned the place. Then she demanded that I open the ranch entrance. Victoria told me the HOA had decided that the property belonged to the community. I reminded her that an HOA decision couldn't rewrite a recorded deed. She became furious and told Daniel to take control of the gate. That was when I realized this wasn't going to be a simple disagreement. Daniel walked up to my gate and examined the heavy chain. Victoria told him to remove it and let the HOA representatives inside. I calmly told him that this was private property. Then he made a decision that would change everything. Daniel tried to open the gate, while Victoria watched from behind him. I didn't threaten anyone or raise my voice. I simply told him that the property was privately owned and documented. Then I noticed another vehicle approaching from a mountain road. The approaching vehicle wasn't another sheriff's unit. It was a dark government SUV with an official federal insignia. Victoria's confident expression suddenly disappeared, and Daniel had no idea that the person stepping out was about to recognize me. The man who stepped out of that SUV walked directly toward my ranch gate. Daniel immediately recognized the federal credentials on his jacket. Victoria looked confused and suddenly became much quieter. Then Michael looked at me and said, "Good to see you, Jack." Michael and I had worked together before, but nobody in the HOA knew that. He wasn't surprised to see me because he already knew exactly who owned this ranch. Daniel stared at us, clearly trying to understand what was happening. Victoria finally asked, "Who exactly is he?" Michael identified himself as a federal agent and showed Daniel his credentials. Daniel immediately stepped back from the gate. Victoria seemed even more confused than before. Then Michael asked Daniel why a local officer was attempting to enter private federal property without proper authorization. Daniel tried explaining that he was responding to an HOA complaint. Michael listened carefully but asked for the legal authority behind the complaint. Daniel had a sheriff's badge, but that didn't give him ownership of my land. Victoria's entire argument was beginning to fall apart. I handed Michael the same property records I had shown Daniel. He looked through the deed and survey and immediately recognized the boundary. The disputed land was clearly part of my ranch. There was no legal basis for the HOA to claim it. Victoria finally realized that her brother couldn't simply take control of my ranch. Her confident attitude disappeared almost completely. She started insisting that the HOA had made an honest mistake. But the problem was that she had sent a police officer to enforce that mistake. Daniel finally lowered his voice and admitted that he had relied on the HOA's claims. I told him that I understood he had been given incomplete information, but I also reminded him that private property rights couldn't be ignored. Michael agreed that the matter needed to be documented properly. Then another federal vehicle appeared at the end of the road. Michael told me that his supervisor had been briefed about the situation. Victoria looked toward the vehicles and seemed to realize how serious this had become. Nobody was laughing about the ranch gate anymore. Michael's supervisor reviewed the situation and asked for the original HOA documents. Victoria had no problem producing them at first, but once the documents were compared with my deed, the contradiction became obvious. The HOA had no authority to seize or control my ranch. The gate remained exactly where it had always been, on my private property. Daniel finally understood that his badge didn't make the HOA's claim legitimate. Victoria had sent her own brother to take control of land she didn't own. And now, with the FBI standing beside me, she was about to face the consequences of that decision.